Welcome to In the Telling. I'm Stephen G. Forwood.
And I'm Miranda Mims, and we are the co-founders of the Nomadic Archivist Project.
Join us twice a month for stories about the Black family experience from people just like you. Family lore, saving personal and family records, connecting family stories to local, national, and international histories, researching archival institutions, loss and grief, physical and spiritual spaces, and so much more. As we all know, the world has been dealing with the devastating impact of the COVID-19 virus. In this difficult time, we at NAP sincerely hope that you and your families and loved ones are safe and sound. NAP is still offering our scholarship and has extended the application deadline, Thursday, April 30th, 2020. In the event that the Society of American Archivists decides to cancel its annual conference, NAP is considering alternative ways we can support individuals in their professional development, including membership dues, course registrations, travel costs, and projects. Please check our website for updates.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome our guest today, Katherine Cheairs. Kat is a filmmaker, educator, curator, activist, and community artist. Kat's areas of interest and research include HIV AIDS, visual culture, media arts therapy, community arts, and critical race theory in art education. She is co-curator of Metanoia, Transformations Through AIDS Archives and Activism, an archival exhibition focusing on the contributions of Black women, trans women of color, and HIV AIDS activists from the early 1990s to the present. She is the producer and director of the documentary Ending Silence, Shame and Stigma, HIV AIDS in the African American Family. Kat's new project in development, In This House, is a video installation exploring HIV AIDS narratives through the Black body. We are very excited to have you here with us on In the Telling. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you, Stephen and Miranda. It is an honor and pleasure to be talking with you.
This is great. So I want to sort of talk with you a little bit, Kat, about the reason why you chose to talk about your great-grandparents, your maternal great-grandparents, if I'm not mistaken, in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes.
So first, I guess, when you brought the subject, I wanted to find out your first memory, when you first learned about your great-grandparents, your maternal grandparents. Can you trace that memory? Who were you then? Where were you then?
Yeah, so this is my mother's grandparents. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason why they stick out for me is because they were very important for my mom. When she thinks about her childhood, her connection to her grandparents is very strong. And so I probably always knew about them through her, and particularly the role that her grandmother, who is my great-grandmother, played in her life, mm-hmm. And her generosity and her spirit. And so, this is my early childhood. So, I'm probably first meeting them around 7 or 8 years old. Okay. They have been long passed away, but their visits in the summertime, you go and visit family, and it's the summer break. And so you go with your brother or your family to go home and visit the grandparents and great-grandparents. So my grandmother is also from Memphis, Tennessee. And so I always say that I come from Tennessee people. My dad's people are from Nashville and Jackson area. Oh, yeah. And my mom's people are from Memphis. And so I consider that very formational to my own roots. And
where did you grow up, Kat?
I actually grew up in Atlanta.
Oh, okay. So not too far from them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, we would be 8-10-hour drives. And that probably started my love of long car rides and drives, mm-hmm. Seeing the scenery and, getting out of your own, comfort zone. And yeah, that usual story of, you go and visit grandparents and family for the summer during the holidays and have a great time. And so that really stuck out in my mind.
Schooled, right? When you grew up?
Yeah, so, yes. So I was homeschooled. My mother homeschooled me from around, let's say, 8-9 years old up to around the age of 12, 13. So I was homeschooled for 4 years. And so that also meant that the way that my time was structured was a little different. So, you know, sometimes my grandmother might come visit and stay with us for the summer. And, you know, sometimes I might go, you know, and visit them in Memphis, my grandmother and great grandmother during that time. And my mother is a retired early childhood educator.
Okay.
And so, you know, I needed some additional support in those years of my life. And so she decided to teach me at home. And, you know, and I have a strong, you know, love for homeschool kids. You know, it's a little different.
Yeah.
You're oriented differently. And
was your mother or your grandparents, do you know anybody else in your family through the generational lines that were also homeschooled?
You know, that's a good question, and I don't think so. It's
Okay.
interesting because my great-grandparents, they did not even finish elementary school. My great-grandmother, I think, did 3rd or 4th grade. My great-grandfather may have up to a 7th or 8th grade education, but they were very entrepreneurial, and in a sense had a really strong work opportunities for people who were, you know, Black in the South at that time. You know, my great grandfather worked for Firestone, which was a good job at that time. My great grandmother was a domestic. She worked, you know, in white folks' homes, you know, cleaning. But then she had her side businesses. She did barbecues. She had, you know, would always in the summertime go to these massive fairs and sell, you know, legendary barbecue that really put my aunt and my mother through college. So even though they were not quote unquote educated people, they were very, you know, wit and this again comes from a lot from my mother, but also my own experience with them is very like, you know, that knowledge that just comes from being in the world, you know, from being caring people, being thoughtful people, and not the position that you're in or how the outside world may treat you has an impact on how you see yourself and what you do in your everyday and in your home. So
speaking of selves, can we hear their names and bring them into this conversation?
Yes. So I checked in with my mom so I can get this exactly right.
Okay.
So my great grandmother's name is Martha Ann Boylan.
Okay.
So that's her her maiden name, if you will.
Okay. What, and how do you spell Boylan?
Boylan.
Okay.
Okay.
And incidentally, my middle name is Ann, so Katherine Ann. And my aunt is Sybil Ann. So the name Ann, which I'm not exactly sure how that gets passed down now that I'm thinking about it, but that is a recurring name.
Yeah.
Yeah, very generational. And so her full name is Martha Ann Boylan. And then when she meets and marries my grandfather, or my great grandfather, whose name is Manuel Price, Manuel being Manuel, she becomes Martha Ann Boylan Price.
So why did you go to Memphis to visit their house? That's the question I had, almost the first question I had, but I wanted to kind of get in a little deeper into the conversation. So
So, you know, so oftentimes visits to Memphis in the summer mostly would be, you know, staying with my grandmother. That might just be me, or sometimes my brother as well. I have a brother who's 7 years older than me. And they'd always center around going to visit great granny. And they had this little white house, you know, on Trigg Avenue, which is, you know, kind of, you know, if people are familiar with this part of Memphis, it's very near to Elvis Presley Boulevard, and you know, other popular areas like Poplar Street, Poplar Avenue. So they had this little white house on Trigg Avenue. And the interior was all wood paneling. Like, if I can bring myself into the space, And it was filled with trinkets and things that my great-grandmother had acquired, you know, immaculately clean. And then in the backyard, peach trees, tomato patches, chicken coop, you know, crepe myrtle trees that my great-grandfather was really the person who cared for that space. Okay. So my great-grandmother, you know, creates this interior space, but then my great-grandfather has these things going on in the backyard. And so, you know, it would be just a part of family visits to go there. And the reason why, you know, it has such sweet memory for me is because I can remember, you know, being in the backyard with my great-grandfather and plucking the tomatoes right off of the vine and eating them like an apple, and so sweet. And I love, because you know, being in Atlanta, I'm in a suburb kind of city. And so, and they're kind of like not in the country, but they brought a little bit of that country into their backyard space. Yeah, so
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, so to go to the backyard and you know, and have the chickens in the backyard and them getting the eggs directly from the chicken, and can see the tomato patches growing up from the ground, and the peach, you know, tree, the peaches drop off and they're so sweet. It's a kind of like just memory of sweetness as to who they also were as well. The very generous, kind people. And a lot of people in the community came to them for care. You know, my great-grandmother was a kind of one of those women in the community that if it was holidays, if it was Christmas and Easter, people could come and get a plate. They could come and get a slice of cake. You know, who are you baking all these cakes for? Well, so-and-so might come over and they need to have some cake. You know, so she was really that woman. And I see her often. She is a very strong ancestor and spirit guide who has continued to be with me. And I'm very aware of her presence. And this was a woman who had been through a lot. She had lost both of her legs from the knee down to diabetes. So she was in a wheelchair probably ever since I knew her. And but I always think of her and see her, who she was, as beaming out and smiling. And it didn't matter that she didn't have, you know, legs or whatever. She never lost that sense of generosity and this light that just beamed out of her. And there's always this like, it's going to be all right. It's, you know, it's fine. Was up until she passed. And so the memory of her and in that space, even from a young child, just has continued to stay with me.
When did she pass?
This would have been, and I actually tried, my mother was actually looking for all of the birth certificate, all of that, and was having trouble finding it. But, you know, I want to say this is probably late 80s. So about maybe my 13, 14 years old is when she passed away. And I think my great-grandfather passed away before she did. But they were pretty close in terms of when they transitioned.
I love, Kat, I love the metaphor that you were sort of speaking to with the memory of sweetness, both talking about just like the physicalness of being there and eating tomatoes, and then the sweetness of spirit. It's really nice. Do you know who built the house? Was it your great-grandfather?
Oh, you know, I actually don't know. I don't think so. I think that they were able to purchase the house. And I don't know how. Again, just...
Do you know what year about they would have purchased it?
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me do some math. So this would have been, especially because my aunt and mom really spent a lot of time in this house. They're in the, so I'm going to say, 40s,
Okay.
1940s, 1950s.
Do you know what style house it was?
It wasn't quite a shotgun house, but
Okay, a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was kind of like maybe like a, because it was near the railroad. So it might have had a kind of railroad house kind of feel, because it was on the street with other houses of similar type.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that space has been completely transformed. It doesn't really look exactly how it did then. I mean,
there?
and didn't get, the home itself didn't necessarily get preserved or cared for as it passed on through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Did it stay as it got passed on? Did it stay in the family? Is it still in the family?
Yes, it actually is still in the family. It
Nice.
actually still is in the family. So my great grandfather and great grandmother have 2 children, and one, of course, being my grandmother. But then she has a brother. We call him Uncle Sam. Clearly, he's not my uncle, but everybody calls him, of course, Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Great uncle, but he and his wife adopted a daughter that is, I believe, still currently living in that home.
Okay.
So it actually did stay in the family.
It did. Okay.
But it wasn't preserved, in that sense. Mm-hmm.
So I guess when you're talking about preservation, I'm wondering if you have any documentation as far as like any home videos or photographs or people writing about the house, maybe through like a letter or in a journal that sort of like spans the time in which various generations have lived in this house.
I don't know if there's like a specific kind of documentation. I actually tried to find, because I think it's still in storage in Atlanta, but I actually did write a short story that is kind of a period piece that references a lot of my great grandmother and what it would have been like to be through a child's eyes. And I tried to comb through all of did I email to myself like a decade ago or whatever. But so much of our histories are through memory, because
right.
All of my grandparents and great grandparents are gone, and there's so many things that I would want to ask them, now, because what ends up happening is that the family, depending on what the dynamics are, the relationship, we don't preserve these histories in memory, or it goes with the person. And so I know that my aunt has a recording of just family history that is on a CD that I want to, have access to. And then I also want to begin, and I've told my parents this, to start really doing some oral history collection with them.
Yes.
Because they're of a certain age and have defied death multiple times. That it's time is not of the essence, because they're actually doing okay to really get out these stories, because I do think what ends up happening is that people don't know that things are important.
Right.
And I think I run up against a lot of that with my own family, and it's a small family. It's just my aunt and my mom, and then my family. It's like 2 offspring of my parents, and then my aunt has 1 son and 2 grandsons. So we don't come from that large Southern family, where it's like lots of cousins and uncles and aunts. It's a pretty tight group.
Yeah.
So once people leave, it's like, oh well, and so I'm very much interested in both on my dad's side and my mother's side, of doing in the next several years a lot of just documentation. I know that on my father's side, for example, the Cheairs plantation, which comes from my last name, is still a standing structure.
And where is that?
That's in Franklin, Tennessee.
That's in Tennessee too. Okay.
Yes. And so the namesake of my paternal line is, is still preserved in the structure of the plantation, of the Cheairs plantation. And so that's been something that I've been long interested in engaging in, but am also terrified because I don't know what kind of information or ghosts lurk there. But on both sides, I want to make sure that things are not lost, but the way that I think about, my great grandparents and my grandmother is in this sort of space of memory of how they function in these sort of physical structures, I think I'm always interested to make sure, especially in doing archival based, like sort of artworks, and is to really know that no matter what, that we have stories worth preserving, that it can be hard to access memory, especially if there's trauma in the family, if there's disjointed memory, but that in our everyday ordinariness of Black people too, that there's magic there, that if we can, because in certain ways, I think the reason why my great-grandmother sticks out to my mom is because of certain dynamics that were happening in the family that made my great-grandmother central, more so than her mother. And it's like, if we can get through that to talk about the essence of the things, then let's try to do that so that we can have a record of, who we were in these times. And to really know that, we're making history, we don't have to be just famous we're in Black History Month, so we all know these sort of heroic stories of the Harriet Tubman and the, we tend to celebrate the extraordinary, Negroes, so to speak. And that, my great grandmother was a quote unquote ordinary woman who was central in her community. She is a, Baptist. She went to St. John's Baptist Church. She used every tool that she had to create a life for her family that had dignity in it. And like I said, she would go and work in white people's houses all day, back-breaking work, demoralizing work, and could still come home and make my, mother's, homecoming gown, could still do Saturday, summer barbecues that would put her, that even if she didn't go to college or finish even secondary school, could still put my aunt and my, my mother through college. And that these things are extraordinary acts.
Right.
That these things that seem ordinary, because they shape who I am. I mean, the fact that I come from this kind of stock of Black women makes me who I am when I show up in a room. I know how I carry myself has to do with how my great-grandmother carried herself into a room.
Right.
Irrespective of what work she did or how people treated her. And so, so I think that, for viewer or, for the audience to take that in, and into their being about when we're moving about our day, that we are bringing our ancestors in the room with us, and to use that as fuel and support in the ordinary way of making a barbecue, of the ordinary way of baking a cake. But that is not ordinary, that there's a kind of currency in that, that is beyond, just the material, that's always communicating and there to be accessed. And so that's what I would, share with people.
Yeah, Kat, that's powerful. That's really powerful. I really hope that you're able to start getting some of these oral histories too from, your mother and your aunt. I think that would be pretty amazing.
Agreed.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Coming on, and we
we look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Thank you so much, Stephen and Miranda.